Octopath Traveler released back in 2018, and at the time it had one aspect that immediately made it stand out from all the other releases: the HD 2D art style. Nowadays you see this art style everywhere, from remakes to new games and from action to turn-based RPGs, and that's for good reason. It looks gorgeous, it can be made in a relatively short development cycle, and they don't need insane budgets as the other AAA releases do. And since the release of the original Octopath, just like the art style, the series has also expanded quite a bit, with a sequel, a mobile spin-off, and soon a remake offset spin-off, containing loads of new content. But as time goes by, the original seemingly gets less and less attention. A lot of people will tell you to just play the sequel, as it's not directly related and apparently it's better in every single way. And since the new one is going to be called Zero, that's bound to become a starting point for some. But I'm usually not the type of person to start a series with a sequel or a prequel, and a while ago I was lucky enough to get a review code from Square Enix for the PlayStation port of Octopath Traveler 1. I'm a bit late with this video. At the time I didn't find the time to dive into the game, and shortly after it didn't seem relevant anymore, so I thought I'd wait it out a bit, and with the release of Octopath Traveler 0 on the horizon, this seemed like the perfect time for me to finally cover this title. So if you're like me, and if you're curious about the original game in the series, then I hope you enjoy this video as I talk about my spoiler-free impressions to find out if it is still worth your time. And let me just start off immediately by saying that while the game does have a few weird kinks, ultimately it really surprised me with how much I've enjoyed it. I'll cover both the positives and negatives, but overall I'd say that the game has definitely left a strong impression. I was kind of expecting to make this video and come to the conclusion of, it's alright, but I'm genuinely having a really fun time every time I boot it up. It's quickly become this comfort game for me, in the way that it's not the main game that I'm playing, but it sits comfortably in my rotation, as the game has the perfect structure for something that you just boot up every now and then when you have an hour to kill. Because as the title of the game conveniently states, this is a game about 8 travelers, and when you start you get to pick one of these travelers as your starting point. When picking a character, you will see that each and every one of them has a little synopsis to tease their story, and as you can already see, all of these are very diverse, from the setting of where the story takes place to the goal and the personality of the character, and based on this little description, you choose your first traveler. Fun fact, if you take the first letter of each traveler's name, you can actually spell out Octopath, and they're even in order if you start with Ophelia. As it goes Ophelia, Cyrus, Tressa, Oberon, Primrose, Alphen, Tyrion, and Hanet, which is a really fun detail in my opinion. Not that you actually need to pick that order, of course. Personally, I started with Tressa, the young merchant who wants to see the world beyond her hometown, as that is just a story that interested me personally, and I felt like a synopsis like this perfectly encapsulates what I had in mind for a game called Octopath Traveler. So you pick your character, you get their backstory as you play through their first chapter, you explore their hometown, stuff happens, you explore a dungeon, more stuff happens, you fight a boss fight, and at the end of chapter 1, no matter who they are, they decide to set out on a journey. So you get your objective for chapter 2, but then you see that chapter 2 is quite far away and it's a serious level jump. So while you could go there, I guess, and get your ass kicked, the more sensible thing to do is to journey to the next town where the next traveler awaits. You run into them and the game asks you if you want to see their story. Of course you accept and you get to play through their backstory. Again, stuff happens, the story catches up to where you met them, they join your party, dungeon gameplay, more stuff happens, you fight a boss fight, and ultimately they also get a reason to set out on a journey. But once again, their chapter 2 is far away and high level, so you go to the next traveler and repeat this process until all travelers have gathered. And guess what? Thanks to this magical thing called called Game Design and Balancing, by the time that you've reached all 8 travelers, your first character should be the perfect level to tackle their chapter 2. This structure is where we have both the brilliance of this game, but also its weakest point. The brilliance, in my opinion, is the fact that this makes the game really easy to just pick up and play. The chapters aren't too long, and you also have a travel log to keep track of everything. And this whole traveling aspect is the second thing that I absolutely love about it. Go figure that I love traveling in a game called Octopath Traveler. But let me tell you this game is just such a vibe. 8 travelers, each on their own journey across the continents, all for their own reason. Be it their search for revenge or a purpose, wanting to find themselves or simply wanting to explore the world. Each character and their story is different, but they all feel thematically coherent because of this spirit of travel. Not a literal spirit, they're not actually possessed or anything, but you can feel this sense of adventure, this yearning for something more, this spirit of the travel in all of them, and it's just such a vibe, especially when paired with the incredible soundtrack. This is one of those games that just had me sitting on the main menu for a while, listening to the music, as it was also filling me with this sense of adventure, and every single time that we reached the climax of someone's chapter 1, we would get a song like this, a song that gets you pumped for the road ahead. And the HD 2D art style also makes everything unbelievably charming. Yeah, this style has been improved upon with newer titles, but that doesn't make the original any less impressive, as the game has some absolutely jaw-dropping views as you're traveling this world to continue their stories. Of course, because every story is so different, some are bound to be more interesting than others, but all of them should have at least one part to spark some interest. Be it the setting, the goal of the journey, the character, or maybe even their gameplay. And you know, if one chapter isn't really doing it for you, the next chapter is always right around the corner, and that also really strengthens this feeling of adventure, as you never stay in any single location too long. But while I love all of the elements that I just talked about, it is a bit weird how these stories are connected. Even for singular characters, it is sometimes kind of annoying that you need to wait so long before doing someone's chapter 2 or chapter 3, because the level jump is just that big. Like if you're, for example, really enjoying Primrose's story and you just finished her chapter 2 and you really want to know what happens next, well, you won't be ready for her chapter 3 yet. You need to do everyone else's chapter 2 first, and then you'll be ready, you'll be at the appropriate level to tackle chapter 3. And in that way, the pacing of all the individual characters can sometimes be a little jarring, but to be fair, these chapters are paced with that structure in mind. I just thought I'd mention it. But another weird thing about the connection of the stories is between the characters, since between characters there's not really any connection at all. I, for example, started with Tressa. I traveled to the next village and I met up with Ulbrich, but we didn't really meet Ulbrich. Tressa and him share maybe 1 or 2 lines of dialogue together, then we see his backstory up until where he meets Tressa and then he joins your party. Of course, Tressa also got to hear his backstory, but as you're continuing his chapter, Tressa won't ever speak again. Ulbrich won't even acknowledge that she's there, and this is the case for every single character. Every single time you get into a cutscene, it only shows the main character of the story that you're currently playing through. Once you reach chapter 2, this does change a tiny bit as you start unlocking very small character interaction scenes, where they talk about their journey so far and the fact they are traveling together, but these scenes are always between 2 characters and they're so short and surface level that they don't really do anything to make them feel like any more of a group, and it doesn't really give them any more character agency during the story itself. So while these scenes are nice, I'm also not really sure why they decided to include them. This isn't really like any other JRPG, where these characters form bonds on their travels or shape each other's stories. No, these are 8 separate stories taking place in the same world. In combat we fight together, in the overworld we are traveling together, but outside of gameplay we don't really feel like a party of companions, even if the cover art gives off a different impression. Sometimes it's kind of weird even that they are a party, like when Tyrion, the thief character, breaks into a mansion. During his backstory, you see him plan this heist, but then on his way to execute his master plan, he joins up with the party because Tressa just randomly talks to him. So this professional thief who is executing his master plan of a heist just randomly decides to take 3 random people with him? Also, in the travel sections, it can feel kind of weird for some characters to be taking all these detours, because some of them have an actual concrete goal in mind, a location to reach, but instead of going there, even if it's sometimes quite urgent, they are taking these massive detours to follow the story of every other character. Sometimes it does work, as Tressa, for example, does have a goal, but she also just wants to travel, she wants to go on an adventure, so for her, it actually feels natural to follow along with these different people. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But with all that being said, I honestly thought that this would bother me a lot more than it actually does. I mean, part of that is because my friends warned me about this aspect of the game. If I just saw the cover art and blindly decided to play it, maybe I would have been more disappointed. Disappointed in the fact that it's not 8 separate people finding each other, growing closer and forming a bond on their travels, finding their purpose together. But I knew what I was getting into, and now so do you. And I also don't mind it as much because this kind of sets the game apart. This structure is just what the game is. Yeah, it's a shame, and I personally do prefer games where characters come together and form bonds, but I'm also not gonna shit on SMT 5 because it's not enough like Persona 5. They're different games aiming for different things. So don't get me wrong, I'm not actively criticizing Octopath for this structure, it's just that I personally prefer one structure over another, and I again wanted to mention it. And as a side note, this actually opens the game up for some more player interpretation, as you can make headcanons for the characters and their relationships with each other, which is a fun aspect of role-playing now that I'm thinking about it. You just know that Tressa is like a little sister to the rest of the group, someone that they want to protect until she pulls out some insane damage with her wind magic, and because she is the way that she is, she's also always walking in front of the group, always leading the pack, which is just my headcanon because I picked her first, so she is in fact always walking in the front of the group. But that's just one case of like a silly little headcanon of the characters that you can kind of come up with while playing the game, because there isn't really that interaction between them. You can kind of fill in the gaps yourself. Some people will like this structure, other people will dislike it, but again, while I personally expected to dislike it, I don't really mind it as I'm playing. It's just all about the travel, and even the side stories play into this, as you can run into different NPC travelers along your journey who have little side quests. Be it out in the world or inside of the towns, you can talk to these NPCs, and as you're traveling, you'll run into them again in other places, as you're kind of following them on their journey, even if you're not literally traveling together. It's something small, but I love how the spirit of adventure is simply everywhere, and every single party member also has a unique way to interact with these and other NPCs, which adds a lot to not only the character individuality, but also to the world as a whole. Alphen can go around and ask people questions, to find hidden items or to gain shop discounts or discounts at the inn. And Tressa is always looking for a deal, so she can walk up to people and buy items from them. But Tyrion, on the other hand, is a thief, so you can also choose to pickpocket these people and gain the same items, but for free, at the risk of losing some reputation in that town. These field skills are something small in the grander scheme of things, but they go quite a long way to make this world feel a lot more alive and to make the characters feel more unique. And within combat, all of these characters of course also play very differently, as each and every one of them embodies a classic JRPG class, which is even mirrored in their story. The combat isn't anything too groundbreaking, but you just got your good old turn-based systems. You can use certain skills skills to break enemy weaknesses to break their guard so they're staggered for a turn. You can charge up your attacks to either attack multiple times in one turn or to simply release a stronger skill. Everyone also has unique skills tied to their jobs. You get different weapon types, magic spells, items, effects, and passive skills. All of it is just really good fun, especially later on in the game when you can equip secondary jobs on characters to use 2 skill sets on one character, and it even changes their outfits, which is so charming. The game isn't aiming to reinvent the wheel, it's just great at being a good old JRPG, but that also means that it comes with the downsides of being a good old JRPG, as it does have a pretty high spawn rate for random encounters, and since there's no EXP given to backup characters, you gotta be quite conscious of everyone's level if you don't want to have to grind. And this game also has some pretty rough difficulty jumps. The first one that I ran into was the boss of Tressa's Chapter 2, who really kicked my ass, even if I was at the right level, which made me explore and get some more job unlocks for the rest of my party, so we all had secondary skill sets equipped. And even then, the boss was still pretty tough, mostly because of how much HP he had, which is a bit of a shame. The combat in general is really well balanced and always feels like a fun and fair challenge, especially because of how much skill and build customization there is, but for some reason the bosses are all extremely tanky, which can kind of drag these fights out. That's the only part that bothered me though. The random encounters and backup EXP thing didn't really annoy me personally, but I know that some people are sensitive to this, so I wanted to make sure to mention it. But in conclusion, despite the weird character story connection thing, I do just really love traveling through this incredibly charming world. Visiting all the different towns, seeing all of the different sites, and seeing where the journey will take our characters next. It's like comfort food. Is Octopath Traveler the best game out there? Is it gonna change your life? I mean, maybe, but probably not. But that also doesn't mean that it's not worth experiencing. Yeah, some stories are better than others, some characters have me more intrigued than others, but in the end they all had their moments and this game is just dripping with charm. So I'm happy that I ended up playing this and that I didn't just skip to Octopath 2 or 0. If anything, this only made me more excited for those titles. This game gave me the perfect taste of the series, a taste of the travels, and I cannot wait to see how the following entries have built upon this foundation. So yes, I honestly do recommend Octopath Traveler 1. It's a classic JRPG. You know what you're getting into, it's not perfect and it does have some weird kinks, but it's definitely worth your time in my opinion. It didn't absolutely blow me away, but it's fair to say that I'm enjoying it far more than expected, and I'm honestly just excited for my next journey. Thank you for watching. If you reached this point of the video, thanks again so much for watching, and thank you again to Square Enix for the review code. I really appreciate this opportunity. Be sure to leave a comment with your thoughts on the game or on Octopath in general. Are you excited for 0 later this year? Are you watching this when 0 is already out, and do you have some thoughts on that game? Do you think Octopath 1 is overlooked, or do you think that I'm wrong and that this game isn't worth your time at all? Be sure to let me know in the comments, and while you're down there, why not leave a like? It really helps out the video and the channel, and if you're interested in more content like this, maybe check out my other stuff. We're getting very close to 1000 subscribers, and that is kind of insane. So if you want to help me reach that milestone, it would mean the world to me. Even just leaving a like or a comment or sharing the video helps out a lot. But I'm gonna stop rambling now. Thank you again so much for watching, I really hope you enjoyed the video, and hopefully I'll see you all again soon.